The Creality Halo Mage brings the futuristic nature of resin 3D printing to your home. Rather than using filament plastic, the Halo Mage uses light and resin to produce incredibly detailed 3D prints that rise from the resin like characters from your favorite sci-fi film. Find out more by searching for the Creality Halo Mage on Takealot. Hello everybody and welcome to a very special edition of The Discourse. My name is Brendan Lotz and today we're taking a look back at lockdown. 4 years ago today, South Africa went into lockdown almost to the day and everybody was forced to work from home. Of course, this resulted in a number of job losses, a number of industries just not being able to work. And we wanted to find out how businesses have responded, how they pivoted, how they persevered, and how far they've come since the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown. So today we've gathered 4 different companies to chat to, namely GuardianEye, Euphoria, Telecom, Root Insurance, and GoMetro. All 4 of them will be sharing their experiences with lockdown as well as where they see their industries going and how they adapted, most importantly, to lockdown. We hope you enjoy this. Thanks very much to Creality for sponsoring this edition of The Discourse. And yeah, be sure to strap in and enjoy the show. We'll see you next time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the special episode of The Discourse. As you have already heard, we're going to be chatting to a whole bunch of business professionals and experts, trying to gauge how things have changed since 2020. As we know, COVID-19 hit, forced us all into our homes and inspired a bit of different thinking within businesses. And part of that involves healthcare. So today we've brought on Managing Director at GuardianEye, Rodney Taylor, to discuss telehealth and a bit more broadly everything as a service a little bit later on in the interview. But let's start by welcoming Rodney. Good afternoon, Rodney. How are you doing today?
Hey, good afternoon, Brendan, and to all your listeners. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks a lot for putting the time aside to chat to me about IoT healthcare and IoT security and some disruption that's going to be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's start off on that. What is GuardianEye? What do you guys do? Because from what I can see, you truly are an everything as a service sort of company. You have your finger in a whole bunch of pies, but tell us a bit more about what GuardianEye is and what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, 100%. So Brendan, GuardianEye is a business that was established 12 years ago. And the entire purpose of the company is we want to be able to virtually collect data. Actually, we were virtually collecting data from camera analytics. We were bringing all of that data and all that information into our centralized nerve center. And once we received all of that data, we could then make critical decisions on what we see. So a primary example would be, perimeter health of an establishment. We would have AI running to ensure that area is safe. It would identify whether it's a threat or possible threat. And then from there, our software then will make the decisions. And from there, we will then execute on that data and then escalate that to a security company or to a facilities manager. So basically, we're an orchestrator of data in the security industry, whether it's identifying even facial recognition to identify a person, identify a vehicle that's possibly could be threatening, identifying a possible perimeter breach. So anything relating to a virtual guard, which we call the product intelligent guarding, whereby we are actually replacing the person on site that's physically put in harm's way, that all of this can be run virtually in a safe environment at our nerve center with highly trained specialists in the nerve center.
Fantastic. And we've heard that, we've heard it for years, at least I have, for as long as I've been writing for Hypertext, that data is the new oil. And I think that sort of thinking has been revived with the popularity of large language models and generative AI. So I'm starting to see a lot more emphasis being put on data once again. And I think being able to access data that's important for your business is really, really valuable in this day and age. Is that correct?
100%. Data is the new gold, as many people are starting to realize. And we focus heavily in South Africa due to obviously the crime and the circumstances the country is in. we wanted to find a more efficient way to provide security for our customers. Mm-hmm. And gone are the days of putting down a guard or putting down reaction units. The data is available to us, and we can react a lot faster on the data coming into our virtual nerve center when it applies to a threat around security.
So I think that your mention of security is very important, especially regarding the topic of this conversation, which is telehealth. And I imagine that, or digital healthcare, as I prefer to refer to it, because I think telehealth kind of limits it to, it's a doctor on a phone. But as relates to digital health, I can imagine that security needs to form an essential part of that, given the sensitive nature of information that doctors or healthcare institutions and even patients are sharing with each other. I imagine that security is really, really important in that conversation.
It's extremely 100%, just as important as the security information we're sharing in your premises. We monitor some very, very large corporate sites in South Africa. So that information is sensitive as is with, who's accessing the building, are they allowed to be there, what time did they get there, who is the person. So it's more around identity as a service. Is that person there? Is he allowed to be there? So, anything relating to data, it's hard. The Property Act is obviously relevant in South Africa. So, all that data is harvested and in a secure environment in our data center, which is part of our nerve center.
So I'm curious as to, since 2020, how seriously folks are taking this security, because we've heard from a couple of experts in the past that security is kind of a second thought for people who aren't in an ICT business. And I can imagine that in my GP's office, where things are being run on what often feels like an Windows XP PC, I can imagine that security is kind of an afterthought. So how has that changed over the years, and how has Guardian Eye helped its customers kind of take security a little bit more seriously?
So I mean, it's an entire digital journey, it's the way of the future, and it's building blocks as you go. You got this puzzle piece. Everything can't be done in one instance. So it's a journey that we take our customers on. It's very similar to the journey that happened probably 10 years ago when customers started taking their servers that were on site and moving them into the cloud. It was unheard of, and it was scary, and nobody trusted this cloud. Where now you probably talk to most companies, and they've removed their data, they removed all of the hardware that's on site, and they physically put everything into the cloud. The same is happening with security, and that especially during COVID. You must understand what happened in COVID is the office parks standing, empty with no staff in them. Everybody went and worked from home. All of those buildings still had all of their assets in them. There was a massive threat because there was nobody in those buildings to actually manage and look after them. We also found that staff that were working from home, they had all this expensive IT equipment now that they were lugging back to their home. So we created this virtual environment that we can virtually protect a business that's working from home, as well as protect a business that's working in a hybrid solution where the person is working from home as well as in the office. And that's when this virtual security started to explode during during the COVID environment, because all of those assets around the country still need to be managed and looked after.
Yeah. And I can imagine, just given how big South Africa is, like corralling all that data is quite the task.
100%. I mean, it's that in its own is just a business to retrieve the data, ensure that it's stored correctly, ensure that there's no cyber threats, ensure that you're compliant with all the ISO accreditation. So that in itself is a business just housing and looking after this data. And that's where this next step arrived during COVID, is with regards to seeing a doctor, or with regards to seeing a nurse, or with regards to seeing a pharmacist, or actually going to have a hospital visit. People have forgotten how that nobody wanted or was able to actually see medical practitioners. We took the same stance, what we were doing with our customers, our corporate customers around the country, saying it's about time that we start looking at a way to do health better, like we've done security better. And that's when we came up with the concept of AVA during COVID. And AVA is literally a virtual healthcare product, which is very similar to what we did around security. But now, instead of having the security guard on site, we are now bringing the doctor to your home, or we're bringing the doctor into your business in a virtual way, which couldn't be done pre-COVID because the digital legislation actually changed during COVID, not only in South Africa, but in several countries where in the past you had to have actually seen a doctor first to actually be able to continue getting advice or diagnosis from that doctor. And COVID disrupted everything, allowing us now to talk to people across a digital platform, even when for the first time.
That's a revelation to me. I didn't realize that COVID had actually helped enable digital healthcare. That's shocking to me. I did not realize that.
100%. I mean, that's given, it's almost ignited it. But if you go back in time, telemedicine has been around for some time, or telehealth. But the regulations and standardization was very different in every country. And this is now being looked at a lot closer by governments as well as your health sectors. How do we standardize that we can get healthcare to any person, whether they're in a rural community, whether they're in an office park, whether they're in an airplane, flying in an Emirates airline, that they need to get access to healthcare. And this is the solution that we have put together, where Ava is your pocket and your doctor. Wherever you go, you've got Ava with you to have instant access to our highly trained physicians that are sitting inside our nerve center. What we did is, like we did with our security business, where we use cameras as our sensor, or if we use a smoke detector as our sensor, or a tracking device as our sensor, that all connects to our security cloud. The same has been done. We've created IoT sensors that a medical practitioner can use, a nurse man in the street can actually use this IoT device and do an assessment, a primary healthcare assessment, within 17 minutes. And that data, once again, is retrieved, sent into our nerve center. Our AI determines what is critical, and that doctor then is obviously contacted, and that doctor then does a digital consultation, but he's already had what we call asynchronous medicine that is received beforehand.
Yeah.
And asynchronous is, the definition around it is that you're reviewing data prior to doing a diagnosis. When you're doing a telemedicine consult, you're reviewing the data live as the conversation is happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, that for me just opens up massive amounts of potential in terms of access to healthcare. Like, I mean, there's times where I'm really sick, but I don't want to go to a doctor. And I mean, I might wave it off because that's just who I am. But I mean, just being able to consult with a doctor, open up an app and say, hey, I'm feeling this, and this, and call a doctor, and a doctor calls me and says, hey, listen, you might be a little bit sicker than you think you are. Let's have a chat. And I do a consult and find out that, hey, I might be sicker than I actually am. I think that's just so valuable to so many people in South Africa, especially now that COVID is sort of behind us, quote unquote, and folks are once again going into the office when they're feeling a little bit under the weather. I think that something like this is incredibly valuable. And I just want to kind of know what the uptake is for you guys as regards this AVA solution.
That's a very good question. And also, I just want to highlight, this is not a South African problem. Yeah, this is a global problem. You look at America. We were with some of our business partners with America yesterday. I mean, almost 30% of America doesn't have access to healthcare. And if you start looking at stats like India, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, the stats are all the same. Our healthcare system is under such pressure from a financial perspective, as well as from resources, as well as from infrastructure, where something has to give. And this is where we saw the opportunity that we deploy, these health pods. And I mean, in America, Walmart are starting to experiment with health pods using IoT sensors to address the needs of communities that are in rural areas. And we're doing the exact same thing. We've approached certain vertical of customers. Generally, it's a vertical. There's a lot of staff, and they're spread across the country. Like they may have remote offices, or they might be, or as we call them, road warriors. They're on the road all the time. They don't have access to get to these facilities. You're now creating this global citizen that can access our healthcare at any point in time.
I suppose that also helps as regards when it comes to doctors. Like, I know when I move, I'm probably moving doctors as well. And then there's a whole thing of, here's your medical history. Please write it down for the umpteenth time in your life. I'm sure that this helps with information sharing amongst practitioners as well to some extent. Does it?
Definitely. You keep the nail on the head. Going into those doctor's rooms with that same traditional yellow folder. I think
Oh my gosh.
Or they've got a clipboard and they don't have your child's information. So the data is captured digitally and it's always with you. It's inside the app. It's on your phone. You've got access to your medical history at any point in time. You can share that medical history with another physician, or you might be traveling internationally.
Yeah.
And all your data with you. You can share that data with the doctor that in another country. He'll get a very good idea of what your symptoms are, what your medical history is, and it's encrypted and saved, and can't be manipulated. So that data is virtually as if that doctor had pulled out that yellow file and was sitting in front of the doctor with you.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly valuable, especially not even just internationally, but locally in South Africa, like people moving from province to province. I mean, we have lots of people that are employed in logistics and freight industry. So like just being able to access somebody's medical history really easily just sounds incredibly valuable to me. And I'm not even in this field. So I can imagine that for doctors and healthcare practitioners, this is incredibly valuable for them, not only to reduce their risk when meeting somebody, or a potential patient for the first time, but also potentially helping risks of companies that employ these services.
Definitely. So I mean, our ambition. So about our initial trials was across 5,000 users, or we call them 5,000 patients. We had 100% success during those initial pilots. So that's when we stood up and said, right, healthcare in South Africa really needs an injection. And I mean, what we've already picked up, one, at the end of the day, our main concern is the health of the person, the patient. But when you start deploying AV into companies, we started seeing it becoming a productivity tool as well. So where we saw productivity increase is, one, staff were off work less because now they had access to healthcare at the office. Two, we identified staff that were coming to see us like mid-month, didn't have the finances to go and see a doctor mid-month for whatever reason. They could now get a free consultation at the actual business. And there we picked up some serious cases where guys may have had ear infections mid-month. Catching it early prevented that person being off work for possibly a week. Now we caught the symptoms early, now that they only off work for 2 days. So it's called the Bradford theory, and many HR managers swear by it, and we've seen that AV is starting to drive down sick leave by close to 33% just in the sample data and the sample customers we've seen. So I always highlight big business. It's at number one, it's for the health and wellness of your staff, but secondly, it's also a productivity tool that will actually help the business having less people off sick, or having less people off sick for longer times.
Yeah. I know I'm guilty of it. I kind of ignore a problem hoping that eventually it will go away. And then by the time I'm like, okay, no, this is a problem, I end up being off sick for weeks on end, or recovering at least for weeks on end. So I think being able to access that data and being able to use it to make predictions that are rather good by the sounds, I think that's immensely important for businesses to be aware of. Like you mentioned, right, an employee is down for a week rather than 4 weeks, and being able to see like, oh, hey, this guy might have a problem, a real problem, and we can address it before it gets out of hand. I think that's incredibly valuable. I do want to just
also highlight, in those instances, it also prevents a breakout happening in that company.
Oh, absolutely.
So COVID, everybody started engaging with other people, and everybody started getting sick and ill. The same applies in the office. We've got call centers where we've got up to 2,500 people, sitting in call centers, handling inbound and outbound calls, and have activation campaigns. And what we picked up is those companies would utilize our data and say, geez, on the third floor, we already picked up 3 or 4 people reaching out to Ava. Right, there's clearly a problem in that activations team. Somebody's spreading the flu or whatever it may be, and we can immediately stop and prevent that outbreak happening in that department. And that's where this Bradford theory does full circle again, because you what will inevitably happen is that entire department would get sick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it spreads like wildfire, right?
Yep.
So I just want to gauge your perception of something. So Statista has some data out regarding digital healthcare market in South Africa, and they're anticipating it to grow by a compound annual growth rate between 2028 and 2024 of 10.74%. This year alone, it's expected the digital healthcare market is expected to reach a value of 6.31 billion US dollars in Africa alone. Are these numbers sort of in line with what you guys are seeing at Guardian Eye? Are you seeing this rapid growth in the sector?
Definitely, and there's many factors that's going to drive this growth. Now, like I explained earlier, the one factor is in South Africa, our healthcare is under big pressure. It's unfortunately no secret. Our public healthcare facilities are not the best at the moment. Private healthcare is fine and amazing, but it's a certain person in South Africa has access to that. So out of the 44 million people out there, there's a very small percentage of people that actually have access to really good private healthcare or really good private medical insurance. And this is what we've identified as a massive, massive opportunity in South Africa. One, for us as a business, for this exponential growth that we're going to have. But the second thing is all of these blue-collar staff will have access to proper primary healthcare. And the third thing we focused on is, I don't want to discuss price on this call, but at the end of the day, it has to be cost effective. It doesn't help if you launch an amazing product and it's not cost effective. We've come up with a value that we give unlimited access to our healthcare portal, unlimited scripts, unlimited medical diagnosis. There's no fine print in our app. It's the same cost as it would cost you to go to a GP once for the year. So for 720 Rand per annum, you have access for this entire product for the year.
And then obviously you tailor packages for companies depending on how many employees they are, that sort of thing, right?
100%. In some instances, a company may want us, they may have a nurse already on site. I'm talking mines, I'm talking feral clinics, some big call centers. So we provide the nurse, we train the nurse up on the IoT sensors. That nurse now is an extension of Ava, and she consults with the people on site. The other extension is some companies don't have nurses, but they definitely want what we call an Ava champion on site, where we deploy a medical practitioner that's gone through our academy, and that person then is on site administrating our sensors, connecting to our cloud. And then the very, very light version, as you mentioned, you might be an Uber driver out there. Light version where you just have access to our application on the phone, and your diagnosis is done remotely by the phone. But most of those companies will have a Ava Health champion or Ava Health station somewhere in the organization. So if we can't do that diagnosis correctly on the phone, he would then pop into the closest branch where he's actually working at.
Cool. Okay. So I just want to round off by asking you where you see this market going. I know that the NHI is coming in. A lot of people are worried about that, especially private health practitioners. But from a telehealth perspective, where do you see this going? Do you foresee a point where eventually everybody in South Africa and potentially the African continent and the world is regularly using telehealth, digital healthcare solutions? Do you see that as a future where people are avoiding going to doctors for that initial contact, and maybe just leaning on one of these services? Because by the sounds of what you're saying is they're getting a lot better in terms of the data that's available, the sensors that folks can make use of. I'm sure that things like wearables are helping a lot as well. So where do you see this market going for the rest of this decade, really?
100%. I compare it to what happened in South Africa when the Apple Watch explosion happened. It just exploded. Where Discovery launched an Apple Watch, you got it for free, or you had to do certain things to qualify for it. And Discovery Health then were monitoring your data daily. But that was around wellness. And we see our product very similar to what Apple have done. We want every single South African to have this on their phone or download it on their watches, and it's a primary healthcare portal that you've got access to it at any. So that's why we are saying. We have already seen it starting to explode. And it's just a matter of time before you'll have Abe on your phone or on your watch.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for chatting to us today. We really appreciate it, Rodney. Where can people find you? If you can direct us to a website, contact number, where can people find out more about Guardian Eye?
100%. We at this point in time, we're directing everybody to our www.guardianeye.co.za. And on our portal, you are able to request a demo, and we can put you in the consultant will do a free online demo, and then the next steps would be we would then deploy it at your company's offices, just so that all the listeners are clear. This is not a consumer play. We are talking directly to the companies, very similar to an insurance product or a medical aid product, where we are saying to the companies, guys, it's costing you 60 Rand a month to put primary health care into the pocket of your staff members. And that's how we're engaging with HR managers on a daily basis to put this into their budgets, to put it into their businesses. And from a productivity tool perspective, as well as a wellness and health tool, the returns are by far more than 60 Rand per person per month.
Fantastic. If you're an employee, talk to your manager, tell them to tap up Guardian Eye. I think it's a really great solution, and harnessing the power of data for something that ultimately benefits us all. Rodney, thank you so much once again. We'll have links for folks to check out Guardian Eye, but thank you so much for your time.
Right, Brendan. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about Ava. Thanks very much.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next interview in this special edition of The Discourse. My name is Brendan Lotz, and now I am joined by Justin Kutsia from GoMetro. How are you doing, Justin?
No, very good, and you?
Very, very well. Justin, maybe if you could, just to give our listeners a bit of context, can you tell us who you are and what GoMetro does?
Fantastic, yeah. So I'm founder and CEO at GoMetro, and we are a software as a service fleet management platform. We focus on vehicle data via a product called Bridge, which allows us to aggregate different telematics feeds and telemetry providers all into one virtual fleet. So it doesn't matter if you've got for the truck and bus market. So it doesn't matter if you've got a Mercedes or a bus or a BYD bus or a Yutong or whatever make. We put all of the relevant data of those vehicles into one unified platform so that bus operators and truck operators can run their fleets more efficiently and more effectively with data at their fingertips.
And how do you gather that data, if I might ask?
Yeah, so we integrate with all of the leading telematics providers, as well as directly with OEMs. So we have data connections to everyone who is in the telematics space and who makes vehicles, so that we get a consolidated API of data flows to our customers. Our API is a smart API. So in transport, what often happens is there's a lot of subcontracting. So today I'm working for client 1, tomorrow I'm working for client 2. So our API is a smart API that shares data with the right clients that you're working for on the right day. So it allows you to share your telematics data securely for a client when he requests it.
Okay. So let's start off with how the pandemic, so 2020 happened around about this time in March in 2020, and we went into lockdown. So I'm curious as to how that impacted GoMetro and potentially how it shaped your business over the last 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think COVID and the lockdown was a big turning point for everybody. Up to that point in time, the business had been founded in 2014. We had focused on public transport mostly, and so public transport was where we really were directing our attention, with rail, with bus, with minibus taxis. And during COVID, public transport just stopped everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
And so we were sitting in lockdown, kind of thinking to ourselves, well, now what? Where's this business going to go? And we noticed that, well, during lockdown, food still got delivered, fuel still got delivered. The critical services were logistics operations, right? Because we all had to eat. We all had to live. And so we started pivoting our tech towards the logistics sector as well. So we still are very active in bus operations and minibus operations in South Africa and electric bus operations in the UK. But we are, the majority of our customer base by vehicle number is in the logistics sector and is in the trucking sector. So it was a very successful pivot in that we were able to find a very big market where the bottom line really matters.
Yeah.
And so, in public transport, things move a bit slowly. It's public procurement. These projects, have 5-year to 7-year time horizons, right? So it's quite slow moving sometimes. Whereas in logistics, it's on-time delivery. It's businesses competing very, aggressively for market share, and contributions to the bottom line really matter. So if you have a huge truck fleet and we can potentially save 3% or 4% of your fuel bill, that's a very, very significant number when you look at the price of diesel. And so we found that our customer base in the logistics sector were ready to buy. There was an urgency to buy, and there was a real immediate impact on their business when they started working with us and using our technology to drive efficiencies that we could show a strong ROI very quickly.
Fantastic. That's really, really great news to hear that you guys saw an opportunity, pounced on it, and then managed to build your business on top of it. That's really, really interesting and great to hear, actually. So I just want to kind of zone in on something you mentioned answering that last one about electric buses in the UK. We're starting to see a lot more electrification, as it were, not just overseas, but abroad as well. A couple of companies, ironically, logistics companies, have started to implement electrified vehicles. How is this kind of fitting into GoMetro's business? Because, I mean, it's already part of your business, but is it kind of impacted? Is it moving your business forward? I imagine that electric vehicles are also loaded with a lot more sensors and a lot more tech than the older fossil fuel vehicles.
So, I think it feels very far away in South Africa if we think about electric vehicles. The wave hasn't broken yet. However, I can reassure you or just let you know that there is a massive wave of electric vehicles coming to our shores, both in private sector, kind of private use, like the cars you and me will drive, but as importantly to trucks and buses. The leading manufacturers in electric vehicles are generally Chinese OEMs, and the products I'm seeing becoming available in market are of a really high quality, really affordable, and the range and motor efficiencies are improving tremendously. So while it'll feel very far away for us right now to find ourselves with an electric truck fleet or an electric bus fleet, especially because we don't know how we're going to power them just yet, I think that the vehicle choice is going to accelerate so that it becomes a really viable choice to us. Once the vehicle choice is there, then people are going to start solving the grid connection, power consumption, power usage. Our advice to businesses have been use the solar benefits and kind of solar incentives as much as you can to get as much solar onto your factory roofs as possible. And then if you've got a 4-ton delivery truck or an 8-ton delivery truck or a 16-ton, bread truck, there's no reason why those trucks today can't already be using on-site battery storage and on-site solar to power their runarounds. If you're doing less than 200 kilometers on a runaround with your trucking fleet, your little delivery fleet, there's no reason why that can't be powered by sunlight and not Eskom. And then I think the energy market in South Africa is, modernizing and liberalizing and deregulating at a tremendous pace.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So now we've got private generation capabilities, we've got wheeling, we've got all sorts of movement in the energy supply side and the energy generation side, with so much private generation coming online that I think we're going to be sitting with a very different energy market 5 years from now. And 5 years is not that long a time horizon if you think about the investments that are made in logistics chains, in bus operations. So I do foresee a real viable future in the next 5 years where there's a huge shift to electric vehicles in South Africa.
Yeah.
And we've already seen that in London, where out of 5,000 buses, 1,000 are already electric.
Oh, wow.
And London has space constraints. It's got grid constraints. It's got lots and lots of demands on resources in that mega city. Yet they have found a way to make 1,000 buses already run on the road there with all of those constraints. And I don't see how we can't, because boer maak 'n plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we are just loaded with sunlight. I mean, it's overcast here in Johannesburg at the moment, but I mean, there's still sunlight and a lot of it. So, I mean, it makes sense, but it also sounds like this is something we should be investing in, because, like you say, 5 years is not that far away, right? It's like the general lifespan of a vehicle that's in use every day for logistics and stuff. So yeah, it's really not that far around the corner. So I agree with you that this is something that businesses should be investing in.
Yeah, absolutely. And also when you think of the price of diesel, right, that's only going to go up.
Yeah.
And it goes up very quickly. So
without warning.
Yeah. So the total cost of ownership for an electric vehicle, electric truck, van, or bus, it is already cost competitive. When you consider all things minus tariffs. So if the South African government was to relax EV tariffs on commercial vehicles, it would already make more sense from a total cost of ownership perspective to be buying electric trucks, buses and vans than diesel trucks, buses and vans today.
I mean, then you plug your GoMetro solution into that with a huge logistics company, and you further make it even more efficient than it was previously. I think, yeah, that unlocks a lot of value for companies from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, there's three things we can do. So we can take their existing telematics data and show a logistics operator which route can go electric today, with what model of vehicle that can do that range, and where they should be building their depots and charging hubs and their operations, so that they never run out of charge. They can run efficiently and effectively. So we can already use the data from telematics to do that for our customers, and we're doing this already for customers in the UK.
Awesome.
Once they purchase the vehicle, we can help them run efficiently. So the data that comes out can show which drivers are using regenerative braking, which vehicles, maybe it's a cold day, so they turn the heater on, so range goes down. It's a real investment in data systems if you're investing in electric vehicles, because you've got the data flows. These are digital vehicles.
Yeah.
You need to manage them very, very closely. And so, yeah, we're already helping our customers drive these efficiencies. And then as you move and penetrate the market, right, more and more EVs come online for our fleet customers. They don't have the space for the chargers. So now what you've got to do is start scheduling charging and do smart charging so that you can get the very best rates, both to charge the vehicles cheaply as well as to sell power back to the grid.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're helping our customers actually earn money while their vehicles are parked in their yard by selling the power back to Eskom at the more expensive rate one day.
That's incredibly clever. That's amazing. That's so smart.
Yeah,
Wow.
so that's the journey of an electric truck or an electric bus. We're seeing this in the markets we're in the UK and the EU. Our investor, lead investor in our Series A round, Zenobi Energy, are the UK's leading bus electrification financing platform. So we are really bringing the very best trends that we're seeing in fleet electrification to the South African market. And that journey is a journey that every truck and bus company in South Africa will walk, and we'd love for them to walk it with us.
Amazing. So hearing you talk, it sounds like you guys deal with a lot of data. So that obviously is going to bring in the question of large language models and generative artificial intelligence. Is that something you guys are incorporating, or something you're seeing requested from your clients?
Yeah, so first you've got to be able to manage the data and handle the data at the volume and the scale that it needs to be done in a way that you can search it. So if we were using traditional database approaches, we'd be bogged down in the amount of data that we're processing.
Yeah.
So our data architecture, our Bridge product, is a next generation data architecture layer for telematics that allows us to have the speed and the agility in order for us to apply AI and machine learning models to these data sets. So that first enabling layer is one which everyone always forgets about, right? We assume just because you've dumped the data into AWS,
No.
be there. It has to be efficiently read, efficiently handled, and managed at scale.
Correctly labeled, all that stuff, yeah.
Correct, yeah. So that's what our Bridge platform does for our customer base, is it first gets the data ready, and now we're starting to dive into machine learning. We're starting to dive into places where we can optimize.
Yeah.
But it's really when we're dealing with real-time charging events, real-time distribution events, that the power of AI comes to the fore. And we've only really, honestly scratched the surface of what's possible, before we get there.
Yeah, it's something that I've spoken about a lot of times, is that like we've seen ChatGPT and things like Gemini and Grok on X kind of rise in popularity in the mainstream. But like my main question for the last year has been, so what's the business use case for this, right? And we're starting to see that happening now. The majority, or the first half of this year, we've seen a lot of development as regards artificial intelligence in a business sense. I know some telecommunications companies are using artificial intelligence to find inefficiencies or breaks in networks, or kind of predict where something is going to go wrong. It's really cool to see all this stuff happening, and it's interesting to see AI finding its place in the business world.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting future. A lot of the applications are really at the chat level and a kind of interaction and the workflow automation level. And I'm quite keen to see it being applied to the power purchasing and the logistics management side of things, as weather changes, as traffic changes, as queues at the border changes.
Yeah.
You want to have the ability to understand what's going on and play out all these scenarios so that you can choose the best path for your operation.
Yeah, we spend billions finding out how to send stuff to Mars, but when it's sending something down the road, we seem to forget about the cost of that. So, yeah, I'm keen to see how emerging technologies influence sectors, especially such as logistics. And that kind of leads into my next question, is we're seeing, especially locally, we're seeing a lot more private companies taking over logistics. Government has, I don't want to say failed, but we're reaching that point where what's happening at the ports is just simply ungovernable anymore. And we're starting to see an increased privatization of these sort of sectors where logistics are required. Do you foresee this happening more into the future, just because of the efficiencies that the private sector kind of offers in this regard?
Yeah, so in transport, we often say you have to compete for the customer. And if you're competing for the customer, then you're improving your service, you're improving your delivery mechanism. And unfortunately, the lack of competition in long-haul logistics and rail, and the lack of competition in port infrastructure, has unfortunately, I think, ended up where the monopoly on these services in South Africa has meant that there's no real market punishment for delivering a deteriorating service.
Yeah,
we desperately need rail to work, freight rail to work. For our commodities markets, for our goods markets, also for our road network, right? We spend so much on road repairs where the damage comes from trucks, not from cars. And so even our road budget, rehab budget, would be less if we could get more things onto rail. So the first real focus is on railing things, right? Not trucking things, but railing things, which is kind of against my own interest, right? Because I for trucks. But if we can get things back onto rail, and I'm seeing really promising. There's a white paper that the government has released. There's a new rail policy which invites private participation in rail operations and rail concessions, and there are companies dipping their toes into partnering with Transnet on delivering services. We've seen, I think, Sasol in one regard. I read a report that they were going to pay for maintenance on one line. There's cooperation with the citrus farmers who get their goods out of Ceres and surrounds, where that's a key rail operation. So yeah, I do think that rail operations are showing signs of improvement. and the ports as well have hopefully reached to the very, very bottom of being rated one of the worst performing ports in by the World Bank. Out of I think 100 countries, we were in the bottom we were somewhere like 96th out of 100 or something like that. I don't remember the exact statistic, but yeah, we definitely had some of the worst performing ports, and we see this interestingly enough in the data that comes out. So we saw a lot of truck operations from Gauteng to Durban and Gauteng to Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha and the like. So those were quite productive ports, and we've now seen logistics shift. The telematics are now shifting, where instead of going to Richards Bay, people are headed to Maputo. Instead of going down to Durban, they're headed up to Walvis Bay or even as far as Dar es Salaam. And so a lot of our customers, if they're originating their trips from Zambia or from further north, they're not coming down to Durban. They're not coming down to our ports. They're picking Tanzania's ports and Namibia's ports because they're guaranteed of getting their goods out. And we've seen that in the refueling with the Suez Canal crisis and the kind of the Red Sea attacks that have happened recently. A lot of traders passed by South Africa's ports, but they haven't stopped to refuel in South Africa's ports. They've stopped elsewhere, further north of us or further, on both sides of the oceans. And so I think the critical part of South Africa's logistics chain that absolutely cannot be left to deteriorate is South Africa's ports.
Now, would we be able to incorporate something like GoMetro's solution into our ports in South Africa to make them more efficient? Is that an option that you guys have toyed with?
So we're an on-road technology. So we're helping vehicles on the road get to their destinations on time, or predicting when they'll get there, managing these large virtual fleets. A port's constraints are different. A port's constraints is how quickly can you process ships, how fast are your cranes, how efficiently do you get your containers in to offload or your containers out to offload. It's very much a spatial geometry problem and a different operation to an on-road delivery. So you can be very efficient, and that's what's happening in South Africa is we're very efficient on road. But the moment you hit the port queue, you're now in a queue. And you've got to get into the port, which takes forever. You've got to get your container offloaded, which takes forever. That container has to wait for a crane slot to get onto a ship. That ship has to be cleared. So it's a shipping problem that needs to be solved. And our technology is an on-road technology. So we would, if anything, if the ports are not made efficient through port management software and solutions, we're going to make the problem worse by sending more trucks more efficiently to the ports than the ports can handle.
Fair. So where do you see GoMetro within this decade, by the end of this decade? What are your predictions? Increased electrification of logistics. Where do you guys see yourselves in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we're currently signing on more and more logistics operators onto our Bridge telematics aggregation platform. We're aiming to get every logistics operator onto our aggregation platform for data sharing and be part of the logistics infrastructure in the markets we serve, having close to 100% penetration. And off the back of that, then we want to help as many customers as possible accelerate their investment in electrification, have the pain points and the steps laid out for them, just like I explained to you, today. So that there's this journey that they go on us with, or go with us on, and then we'd like to get to as many electric trucks and buses running the streets as possible, because that is an investment in the future. That's an investment in less oil production, less carbon emissions, cleaner streets. The emissions from a diesel engine with regards to NOx and SOx is as bad as CO2, right? So we all talk about CO2, but London is creating these ultra low emission zones for asthma because they don't want respiratory diseases to be as prevalent as they are due to the diesel that everyone breathes in. So, we do, fight against climate change and CO2 emissions, but I think as importantly in the short term is the diesel emissions that we breathe in every day. And we can end that, and we should end that, and GoMetro wants to be part of that solution.
Fantastic. Justin, one last thing. Where can people find out more about GoMetro?
Cool. So you can visit our website, gometroapp.com, where you can see our products and you can book a demo and you can kind of lodge some interest. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's generally where a lot of people find me and message me. Or you can email hello@gometroapp.com if you'd like us to reach out to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Justin, and all the best.
Great. Thank you very much.
With an 8K resolution, you can craft high-resolution 3D prints with exquisite detail using the Halo Mage from Creality. Not only will your prints have better detail than older FDM printers, you can enjoy faster speeds and larger prints. A wide gamut of softwares are supported, so you can get printing as soon as you receive your new printer. To find out more, visit Takealot and search for Creality Halo Mage. Hello everybody, and welcome to another interview in this special edition of The Discourse, where we are looking back over the last 4 years since the pandemic and lockdown and how it has affected business and the business world. We all know that lockdown changed everything, and something that I'm interested to hear more about is a company called Root, and we have on the line with us today Charlotte Koop. Charlotte, how are you today?
Hi, Brendan. I'm good, thank you. And thanks for inviting me to your podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. Charlotte, can you tell us what Root is and what you do at Root?
Sure. So I think on a very high level, Root really provides sort of tech infrastructure to the insurance industry. And we really enable companies to offer better, more relevant insurance products to their customers. So that doesn't just include insurance companies. It's also, big brands, retailers, telcos, banks who are actually selling the insurance underwritten by the insurers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. So just as an example, would that be like if I bought a new TV set and I got insurance from the retailer? Is that sort of what we're looking at here?
That's exactly it. The hypothesis is really that people want to buy insurance where they buy everything else, and as part of that process. So that's where the kind of relevant product sort of mention comes from.
Okay. So the reason I wanted to chat to you is that during lockdown, obviously a lot more people were at home. They weren't using their vehicles as much. And I'm sure that this prompted some folks to reconsider how they see insurance. And I'm wondering whether the insurance game has changed a lot, especially with the advent of InsurTech, which has been around for a few years. But I think we've really started to see a lot more innovation and availability in that realm. How has the insurance game kind of changed since lockdown, in your view?
So I think, Brendan, the irony is that insurance has known what it needs to do for a very long time. It's just been kind of bit hamstrung and unable to move towards a more digital world. So what lockdown really did was just a massive call to action to the insurance industry to say, you guys need to stop dragging your feet. You need to move faster towards a digital experience for your customers. So really, I think if you think about how legacy insurance operates, I think the impact lockdown had is probably outsized compared to other industries.
Yeah, I can imagine as much. So in terms of InsurTech, how has that kind of led the charge in this change in insurance?
So InsurTech really is sort of, it ultimately comes down to introducing modern technology into insurance. So a lot of insurers operate on, legacy technology, legacy systems. And what legacy really means is that they're kind of locked into old ways of working. And it's really difficult for insurers to get out of that technology, to move massive insurance books onto more agile systems. So the way to think about InsurTech is it's really a complementary product and a complementary technology to the legacy systems they're sitting on to enable them to do some of the modern things that they actually can't do with their legacy systems.
Okay. So I imagine that a lot of insurance these days is driven by data, and I'm sure that it's a big part of Root's business as well. And over the last couple of months, we've seen artificial intelligence and large language models kind of rising in popularity, and also just generating more data, which these models can use. Has that the popularity and rise of LLMs and AI, has this helped Root in its business at all?
Yes, in short, yes, because it's brought the data discussion up and front and center. So data and access to data and use of data is a really kind of a hot topic in insurance anyway, because a lot of insurers and companies selling insurance actually struggle with data, and that's basic data. So access to their data, access to their policyholder data, policy data, it's really quite archaic. And actually, the discussion I always have with people when AI and sort of LLMs come up is, well, let's just solve step one first, which is actually access to data. InsurTechs will solve that for you. But, insurers need to adopt that in order to actually get the data they need to be able to, price on a usage basis or kind of price in a bespoke way that really suits the policyholder for their risks and their context. So I think the discussion is, yes, it's brought the kind of data discussion up front and center. The reality is that LLM and AI in actual kind of real application and insurance are probably still a bit of a way.
Yeah, I can imagine that when it comes to data in South Africa, it's a mess, and that needs to be cleaned up in order for these technologies to really be utilized to their full potential.
Exactly.
So my question now is, why is there a need for solutions such as Root? Like you've spoken about that the legacy insurers are kind of archaic and set in their ways, but why do we need a company like Root? Why can't Game or one of these big retailers kind of just manage their own thing internally? Why do we need somebody like Root?
That's a really good question. We get asked that a lot because one of the decisions our clients always need to make is whether to buy or to build. The technology that enables the kind of insurance solution that something like Root enables. What we say is that everyone has resource constraints. The access to talent is something that people don't stop talking about. And our view is that you should use your talent to really focus on what's going to differentiate you and your business. So for a retailer, that is kind of, what is the product design? How does that product fit into a better customer experience? Those are the things that your team should be focusing on. Building the technology and sort of maintaining the infrastructure or plumbing, for lack of a better word, that should be outsourced to specialists like Root.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And then as well for the companies, it gives them the opportunity to offer a product they might not otherwise have been able to offer before.
Exactly. So it's really like, let's get the best of both worlds. You understand your customer, you know a bit about product design and where customers are shopping. Use the tools available rather than building the tools yourself.
Yeah, this seems to be a trend that I'm noticing amongst everyone that we've spoken to in this episode of the Discourse, where we're seeing an increased need for specialists that are able to tackle certain problems while the business does other things. Is that reflective of what you guys are seeing as well?
100%. And I think, even in our world, so Root being sort of an end-to-end API first platform, what we enable is really the connection into a broader ecosystem of services. So although Root will we say to customers, we do the full policy life cycle. So we'll help you issue a policy and we'll help you resolve claims on that policy. We might not be the bespoke solution you want for any of those steps, but we can connect into, a specialist claims provider, for example, who maybe, is a specialist in motor claims, which are very complicated. And, you might want to provide a very different experience. And so even in our world, we're kind of going, okay, let's connect you to the specialist services that do these things better than we do.
So you mentioned like API connection, and I know that a lot of people, especially in small businesses, they might not be as tech savvy as most. But I see that Root makes use of a low-code environment, and I'm curious whether that kind of assists businesses who may not have the skills. They might know a little bit about coding, but they might not have the high-end skills of developers. Has that proved attractive to your customers?
Yes and no. It depends on the customer. So I think some of our customers are totally kind of autonomous on our platform. They use our what we call product workbench to actually build their own products without relying on our team.
Yeah.
So for clients that are more tech savvy, it's a really attractive solution. And others, would prefer to outsource that work to us. We are kind of the specialists when it comes to the technical side of the thing. I think the low-code environment versus no-code, I think for us, especially in insurance, having flexibility to build anything that suits any edge case and any requirement is actually key. So in a low-code environment, you can do anything. In a no-code environment, you have constraints.
Yeah.
So that's how we think about the low-code, no-code debate.
Okay. All right. So how do you see InsurTech evolving? Do you see the older insurers that have been around for time immemorial, do you see them eventually going, right, well, maybe we should see what these young bucks are doing and kind of emulate what they're doing? Or do you think that it's already a little bit too late and instead they're going to just be leveraging the services that folks like Root have built? Do you see that happen? Where do you see this sector going?
That's a difficult question. I think it's a combination, again, like I said, and I think it depends on who you're talking to. So the clients we work with, especially the big insurers that are tapping into this ecosystem of insurtechs and are curious about what it can do for them, are going, they're the forward movers, they're the forward thinkers, because ultimately, I think the hypothesis is that customers are going to continue driving the insurance experience they want. And without the systems to enable to meet that demand, customers will go elsewhere. And I think, something we keep saying is we don't want to replace the core systems, but I think there'll be a shift in time where the bulk of the insurance book at any point in time will then sit on a modern system versus the legacy system.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that personally, because I think that a lot of South Africans are frustrated by the status quo as regards insurance. I mean, we've just seen brouhaha with Old Mutual, for instance, and them paying out, I don't believe it was an insurance policy, I think it was a pension fund. But I mean, it remains that these older institutions things fall through the cracks, and being digital, I think, helps you spot a lot more of these edge cases and problems that might arise.
Yeah, and I think another really important thing about that and the trend that we're seeing, and it's really a sort of a bet we've placed right from the start, is that more insurance is going to be sold through non-insurance brands. And the reason for that is that non-insurance brands generally have large customer bases that trust the brand. And I think trust is something insurance brands don't necessarily have or have failed to keep. So, they're leveraging big brands that have that trust and good relationship with their base to sell insurance into. So that's really the kind of partner-based sort of affiliate model of insurance that we think is going to be a big part of the future.
Very interesting. Charlotte, just to wrap up, where can people find out more about Root and how can they get in contact with you guys to find out more about your platform?
So head on to rootplatform.com. You can contact the team for a demo if you want to see a demo of the platform. Have a look at our API, docs, and guides in our developer hub. I know it sounds very technical, but actually it's a great read-through to see what the platform is truly capable of. And otherwise, just email me. It's charlotte@rootplatform.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Charlotte. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Brendan. It was great to talk to you.
Hello, everybody, and once again, welcome to this special edition of The Discourse. My name is Brendan Lotz, and now we're going to move on to the world of communication with Nick Lashinger from Euphoria Telecom. Did I say your name right there, Nick? Lashinger. Sorry.
Easier than it looks.
Yeah, that's what tripped me up, because I thought it was more complicated. So, Nick, if you could perhaps tell us, you're from Euphoria Telecom, but tell us what you do and what Euphoria Telecom does.
Well, thank you, Brendan. For my part, I am the CTO here at Euphoria Telecom, and that means I head up the product vision and the technical side of the business, including infrastructure and the development team. The Euphoria Telecom as a business, well, we built and maintain a telephone system in the cloud, if I may put it as bluntly as that. And that includes call center and predominantly built for small businesses because we thought that was a market segment that didn't have access to the technologies that it needed, and it was sorely lacking in South Africa. So that's really where our bread and butter came from, and that's been our focus in the last 10 years or so. In the last 4, we have evolved more into the contact center space as well, and now catering to larger businesses. But SME is where we were born and bred.
Fantastic. So you say you've been around for 10 years, and you mentioned what you've done over the last 4 years. But we know that in 2020, around this time, 4 years ago, we were given orders to batten down the hatches, stay in our homes. And a lot of companies had to fast track their digitalization journey. And I'm curious how you guys experienced that at Euphoria, because I imagine being a cloud-based communication service, your services were quite high in demand.
Yeah, so let me jump back 1 second. I said 10 just because I was rounding, but we've actually been around for 14 years. So we started out in 2010. Now, I'm only mentioning that because it is important, because back in 2010, if you talked about cloud and cloud technology and cloud services, you honestly had to explain to people that we didn't mean that there were actual servers in actual clouds. And with 2020 and the whole advent of the pandemic, people were almost forced to move toward cloud. Cloud adoption is something that we've seen been picking up for the last, call it 6 years. But in 2020, suddenly location was incredibly important. The ability to have something in the cloud and be physical location agnostic and for people to be able to work from home suddenly became critical to people's businesses. And not just any business, every business. So what we saw in terms of the telecom space was a rapid adoption by businesses who were going, I need to keep working. I need for my users to be able to sit at home and be able to reach them on the extension. I need them to be able to sit at home, but I also need to see what they're doing. I need them to sit at home, but I need them to be able to keep working and still be at the company in inverted commas. Yeah. I need them to still maintain that outward presence of phoning from the company number and receiving calls on the company number, no matter where they are. And so the cloud adoption, which is something we've been pushing for the last 14 years, is now we were the flavor of the month. Unfortunately, it cut both ways because there were a number of companies who were under dire threat. So we got alongside as many of them as we could to help them and cut costs for them. And we got alongside companies that was, unfortunately, we saw a number of companies shut their doors. So on the one hand, we were seeing companies going, help us, we need to rapidly adopt. On the other hand, we were saying goodbye to a number of customers who were closing as fast as others were adopting. So for us, it was a very turbulent time, as it was for most companies. But for us, it was turbulent in different ways. There was an incredible demand, but also incredible fall off at the same time.
So you mentioned that for the last couple of years, you guys have moved towards the call center business. Was that sort of a response to the pandemic as well?
Actually, it was something that I started building hosted call center platforms in about 2013, and I joined Euphoria in 2018, and I brought that skill set with me. And understand when I say the call center side of things, sometimes people just turn off. They go, "Oh, well, I don't have a call center." It's really more than that. It's about your high productivity users. It's about the users that you want to know what they're doing all day, and the users that have to be productive, particularly on the phone. Translating that into something that you as a business owner or an executive can see and understand. I mean, for example, if I walk out the door and I say to the team, how did we do today? And somebody says to me, oh, we did 1,000 phone calls. That's not useful information. Knowing that we did 600 sales, for instance, well, that's more useful than, hey, it was 1,000 phone calls. So translating that activity into productivity and into outcomes is really what we've been doing. And I think that translates pretty much for most businesses, actually, not just call centers.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this increased demand, how did you guys have to adapt to during the pandemic? How did you guys have to respond to that? Did you have to increase hiring? Did you have to increase your provisioning of services? How did that impact the technicalities of Euphoria?
Well, fortunately, our technical stack is quite robust in that regard, is that we can scale out horizontally. So it's was designed that way to scale, and that we have been growing every year quite significantly. We did see obviously some staggering in COVID, but things carry on and we move on and we keep trying to innovate and add more value to our customers. So we continue to see growth. But in terms of the growth in people and stuff like that, I'm a very big believer in automation and being able to utilize the skill set of people for things that machinery can't do, and that is talk to people. Whereas, so the routine tasks that we do every single day, more and more over the years, we've tried to automate those out. So there wasn't a great demand for us to hire, but there has been a great demand for us to get people on the phone, to talk to people and just maintain that human contact.
Okay, that's interesting. So as there's increased digitalization, there's more of a need for that human touch, I imagine, because I know I find it preferable to talk to a human face to face rather than a chatbot, at least.
You want to exercise in frustration, chatting to a bot and asking it to do something that is outside of its programming is probably the fastest way to get everybody irate.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Not to say that chatbots and you would talk more and more. AI is a big buzzword, Not to say that that's not been has its place and has a fundamental use case. Because I'm at 10 o'clock at night. I suddenly want to do something. Well, there probably isn't a human for me to talk to, but I want to do it now. That's an ideal case. So augmented agents with AI and virtual agents in terms of AI definitely have a growing place in this world. But I don't think that people want to get away totally from talking to people.
Yeah. As much as millennials hate taking phone calls, speaking as a millennial myself,
I'm not a millennial and I also don't like taking phone calls, but there are times I'm just like, it would be so much easier if I could tell somebody what I wanted.
So I wanted to ask, this is kind of a combination of questions here. So during the pandemic, something we noticed, or rather during lockdown, really, what we noticed was that the digital divide in South Africa was thrust into sharp relief. It was made incredibly clear that there was digital services that were lacking for the majority of South Africans. And we've heard government talk up things like the fourth industrial revolution and increase in connectivity, but I'm curious from a business perspective, are there still connectivity challenges that are keeping a lot of businesses offline, or is it just more of a mental block that is keeping businesses offline?
Well, Brendan, I'm going to have to throw that answer into two places, because if you're talking in 2020, then definitely there was still some major obstacles in the way of particularly rural areas being able to connect. In your major metropoles, you can't walk out your door without bumping into a cell phone tower, except in Cape Town and Constantia, where nobody wants to put cell phone towers up. So the cell phone signal's so crap. Yeah. But over the last couple of years, the government has made some great strides, and I've got to take my hat off to actually releasing a whole bunch of spectrum from the providers and making that available to put out this broadband evolution that they've been promising and talking about for years and years and years. So the legal impediments to that has been taken away. We're still obviously waiting to see that roll out into something that is a reality, but as I said, 4 years ago versus today, things have changed. They have moved forward. We are seeing, but are we there yet? No, we're not there yet.
And I suppose we can't get away from talking about the energy crisis, because I think a lot of businesses have that front of mind, especially smaller businesses who may not be able to install solar communication. So what sort of benefits do digital communications platforms such as Euphoria's have for businesses that constantly need to be online, that always need to be available? And like you say, when a power user needs to get online and do something at 10 o'clock at night, what benefits do digital communications have in that regard?
Well, firstly, I've got to say, I think that people are perceiving this energy crisis in the wrong way entirely. I mean, we just need to put some treadmills down at creches all over the country and harness the toddlers, because I think we would solve the energy crisis in one fell swoop.
That's the best solution I've heard to date.
But in terms of how does this all affect the business? Well, more and more businesses, and you can see it in advertising, more and more homes have had to turn to alternative energy solutions. I heard a stat quoted to me the other day. I haven't fact checked it, so I'm sorry if I am off base. I'm sure at least one of my friends will correct me if I'm wrong. But that South Africa has the largest base of domestic solar installations in the world now. Now, it's not true. It's probably close to true. The fact that businesses and even homes have had to reach out for other answers to their requirements is A, a testament to the South African spirit, but B, a bit of a sad state of affairs. You can't operate a business. I mean, I went into a mall the other day, probably 2 years ago. Went into a mall 2 years ago, and I walked around, and half the shops were actually closed. And I said, well, what's going on? And they said, no, it's load shedding. And I was like, you just shut your doors? And that to me was absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
How can you? And every single business owner I talked to in that shopping center was complaining bitterly about how this strategy was hamstringing their businesses so badly. But yet there they were. So can a business afford to be without power? No, they can't. However, part of the attraction to cloud technology is that your services sit in the cloud, and they therefore sit in the data center that has redundant power. Mm-hmm. So your services will remain on. Yeah. Now you just got to worry about your users. Now, in the case of telephony, well, we can divert your call to your mobile app on your cell phone, or divert it to the cell phone itself. So, there are ways and means to skin that cat quite easily. That are available at your fingertips. It's a web page. Oh, click, done. Okay, great. Yeah. Your business carries on. Whereas, it's a lot more difficult when you're tied to a location and suddenly that location doesn't have power.
Yeah, and I imagine that it's also, if you're running through a digital cloud, like connectivity, you can fall back on your fiber, you can fall back on mobile connectivity. There's options rather than just being reliant on a telephone box, as it were, the old way of doing things. So, I mean, I think that's what's becoming clear in South Africa is that if you want to do business, you kind of need to take action to safeguard your business, because it's now your problem, really. I mean, I know with us here at Hypertext, we need to have backup power so that we can stay online whether there's load shedding or not. And part of that involves being able to stay online. So you have to make provisions for it. I mean, it's sort of like that old adage, you have to spend money to make money. And in the energy crisis, I think you have to just accept that at this point in time. And in the future, you've got resilience against anything. You're lowering your power bill at the end of the day as well if you're installing solar and alternative energy.
Yes, well, I think that's true for everybody now, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned AI, and I'm sure that you mentioned that you're a big fan of automation. So I'm sure that you've been using artificial intelligence and large language models and machine learning and all these other buzzwords that have taken the mainstream by storm over the last 2 years. But I'm interested to see or to hear from you how AI or these generative AI large language models can be applied to the communications world, and whether you guys are doing that, whether there's demand from customers for more efficiency. How is this a realm that you guys are playing in?
It definitely is a realm we're playing in, and it's a very interesting realm, particularly in the verbal space, because you talk about large language models and stuff like that, but South Africa is a very unique challenge in getting that right, because we have a tendency to do what most other countries don't do, and that is we have the ability and tendency to change language in the middle of a sentence.
Yes.
And it's almost so we can do this. It's all right. But we as humans can follow and can naturally just carry on with things. Unfortunately, to transcription services and stuff like that, and if you ever want to test the theory, turn on your captions in the middle of a Zoom call or a Teams call or whatever it is, and see what purportedly some of the best in the world are doing in terms of transcription on the fly, and it's rather interesting. Now the question comes from that, and this is why I raised that, is that if you now take that data and you feed it into something that is using machine learning and making business decisions off that data, then you're going to come up with some rather interesting decisions. So we're in a learning phase, I think, with all these technologies. And yes, there are definitely places where you can augment knowledge. There, I was speaking about augmented agents who, like, they may not know everything about a topic, but they can bring up that data, they can bring up that knowledge very quickly to be at their fingertips. Whereas, trying to automate transcriptions and automate QA and make business decisions of that, I don't think that we're at the point now that I would want to trust any of those decisions personally. So yes, there are certainly use cases around machine learning, AI, your large language models. There's certainly places that it's making its presence felt more than others. I think I was engaging in a conversation with my father the other day, who is many generations back, and technology is something that is still quite surprising to him. And he was saying about my son is that he should look to become a doctor, and I was like, no, we really don't want that at this point in time. That is for me is a very interesting space where I think technology and AI and being able to, hey, look, these symptoms, here's your diagnosis, is going to make a massive inroads. But I still don't think AI is going to replace the human touch. I think it's not going to replace human empathy. I think it's not going to replace human creativity. And yes, AI can generate a picture, which it brings a new spin onto the age-old question about what is art. But I'm not going to get into that conversation because certainly my sister, amongst any, will skin me alive.
So it's very interesting that your perspective on AI, because I've seen a lot of business leaders and experts, technology experts, kind of hyping it up. And I'm guilty of this myself. I see a lot of what's happening internationally. And I think even me, I'm guilty of forgetting about the fact that South Africa is a very unique use case. Africa as a continent is a unique use case for many of these things. I know that I've often lamented some ride-sharing apps for copying and pasting their business model from the US and thinking that it would work in South Africa just fine, and that has shown to not be especially true in a lot of instances. So the fact that you've got the local kind of thoughts in the back of your mind when thinking about these technologies is very, very interesting. And it's something that I should be more cognizant of. In fact, I think we should all be a bit more cognizant of that before we get swept away with the hype.
You know what? If you're a large enterprise and you're looking at dealing with the UK or the US or something like that, and you're dealing with all the technology in the world and all the backup, then talking about cutting edge technology and how you can implement it in a business, it's incredibly exciting. The potential is amazing.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the guy down the road, your general business owner, and saying, how are you going to implement AI in your business? He's going to go, what have you been smoking?
So to round off, I wanted to get some insight from you as to where technology is moving towards. Oh, sorry, communication technology rather. And the reason I asked this is just last week we had Telecom selling off its towers, and I'm seeing more and more mobile networks, and I say more and more, it's literally Telecom and Cell C at this point, who have sold off their infrastructure and are instead leasing it. And it makes me wonder whether we're moving to a point where companies such as yours, Euphoria, eventually move towards offering consumer services. I'm not suggesting that you guys are doing that, but it is just something that's curious to me, because we see these services being taken up in an increased capacity by businesses. But I'm wondering whether we're moving towards a place where the idea of having a cell phone tower is kind of foreign to people, and we're all using kind of fixed line communication with last mile wireless. Where is communication technology going?
Brendan, that is a very, very broad question, and there is so much stuff that is exciting, and unfortunately, some of it I can't talk about right now. But please watch the space, because I'm hoping to really shout from the rooftop this year. But in terms of technology, I think the one thing that has become apparent in the telecom space is the same thing that's played out in several other spaces already, and that is the separation between underlying architecture and services that run over them. We are seeing the providers spin up. The likes are, we've got companies that all they do is they dig, retrench, maintain, lay fiber, and they maintain those networks. We've got companies who put out cell phone towers. We've got now companies who own cell phone towers, and other companies who use those cell phone towers. So I don't think that is a new spin. I don't think it's different in the world. And somebody choosing to focus on their knitting, so to speak, and what they're good at is probably something we should encourage. We are a solution provider in terms of telecoms. We are incorporating other channels into that to give people communication solutions. Should I go now suddenly, sell them handbags? Well, yes, I've got over 6,000 companies out there who utilize our services. Could I sell them some handbags? Possibly, but why would I want to? And really doing what you're good at and focusing what you're good at and leveraging other people to do what they're good at. And that applies even internal services. So we partner with other technology providers for things like transcription services and stuff like that. So, again, I firmly believe in best of breed. I firmly believe in doing what you're good at and leveraging others to do what they're good at. So is that what's going to play out in the next years? Definitely. I think we're going to see more and more of that. I'm going to see more and more people specializing in certain areas. In terms of what might be exciting on the horizon, in terms of the consumer, I've been saying for a while now, and I will continue to say it, that I think we're going to see the end of the telephone number. The telephone number is really just an address. And that we have the technology to use formats like an email address, for instance, which is a lot easier for humans to remember. I mean, you ask most people who are over the age of 30 these days to name, 10 phone numbers off the top of their head that they know. You're probably going to get with that reaction most of the time. I still remember the telephone number of the house I grew up in.
That's the only telephone number I remember.
But I don't remember the cell phone numbers of some of my best friends, because it's there. It's available in my phone book. I don't see the number. There it is. Look them up by name. So we've kind of moved on, and it's not something that we're giving attention to. Whereas, growing up, everybody knew everybody's telephone numbers. So I think that sort of evolution is coming. I think we're going to see an evolution where a lot more technologies are going to talk to each other. Data is becoming ever increasingly important. So we're going to see the advent of data-driven reporting, data-driven features coming into all sorts of our things. More and more, I'm seeing a requirement for that in telephony, of being able to take telephony data, because I think that's kind of important for me, and kind of important for customers. You want to know who your 20 most pissed off customers are? Your telephone system will tell you that. You want to know your customers that you should be in touch with because you haven't been in touch with them a long time? Well, your telephone system will tell you that. So I think data looking at telecoms on its own, I think, is a mistake. I think looking at the integration of telecom with other components, and I'm saying telecoms not just in telephony, but in your omni-channel, your WhatsApp, your Telegrams, your Facebook messengers. I think all of those channels are going to start talking more and more to each other, giving the choice to the consumer about how do you want to engage, when do you want to engage.
That's awesome. I'm hopeful for that because, like you say, phone numbers, I don't know. If I was knocked down in the street later today and somebody asked me, what's the telephone number of your emergency contact, I wouldn't know. So, Nick, where can people find out more about Euphoria Telecom?
Easiest would be our website, www.euphoria.co.za. Contact numbers, email addresses, everything's on there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick. I really appreciate you taking the time and giving us your insight. And best of luck for the future.
Thank you so much, Brendan.
Fitted with the distinctive translucent orange Mage Arch flip lid, the Creality Halo Mage ensures that the only thing you're receiving is high-quality prints. This flip lid protects users from rogue UV lights while also containing the fumes emanating from the resin used to produce your prints. A removable carbon filter and an air purifier ensure that while you print, nothing bothers you. To get started with your Creality Halo Mage journey, visit takealot.com.